BioBalance Healthcast, Episode 139, Senate Bill 959, Part 2.
BioBalance Healthcast features conversations about positive aging. Your hosts are Dr. Kathy Maupin, Medical Director of BioBalance Health and a leading expert in treating symptoms of aging, and Brett Newcomb, a licensed professional counselor.
Today I'd like to talk about Senate Bill 959, which is a bill to control compounding pharmacies and in everything they do. It is a bill that has a very good premise to keep everyone safe, to keep all of us safe in terms of the pharmaceuticals we get, but it has some buried language that will affect all of you who take bioidentical hormones or any compounded substance like a compounded Viagra, or if you have a child or a person in your family with a disease that has so few people in it that the pharmaceutical companies can't make it, then they send them to compounding pharmacies to make the drug that you need. Therefore, if you are one of those people, somebody who takes a compounded bioidentical hormone or somebody who has an orphan drug user in their house or any other drug that's an IV pain med that you get cheaper than if you used a pharmaceutical company, then this is important to you because this bill seemingly on the surface is to keep us safe, but underneath limits our right to the drugs we need, to the medications we need that are not big enough or not expensive enough or not used enough to have a pharmaceutical company make them. And therefore, this is something that is a threat to our freedom for getting what we need in the U.S. And that's what compounding pharmacies do. Mm-hmm. They take up all those little areas that you can't get patented or you can't afford, and they take that up and they make medicines for people.
Well,
this is very important.
The way that the bill describes the procedure is it says that the bill, if it becomes a law, will authorize the Secretary of Health and Human Services to establish a list of banned drugs that compounding pharmacies are not allowed to make, or to establish a list of exceptions to that list of banned drugs, and to notify the compounding pharmacies or the public at large through putting it in a federal registry, which is a daily issuance of all the things that happen in the federal government. What the bill doesn't say is how the Secretary should go about making that decision. What the protocols or procedures, it just says very, very specifically in multiple places, the Secretary will decide. The Secretary will decide.
It's to her discretion.
And
that's scary.
What's concerning about that is the current regulatory procedure for the FDA and the DEA is established by law. There are steps that they must follow to come to a decision and notify the people involved about the decision. Mm-hmm. And the law very specifically says, for instance, that the Secretary of Health and Education has to follow the recommendations of the science involved in decisions made by the FDA. Mm-hmm. And very recently there was a huge public concern because the FDA had been working for years to formulate a policy around a particular medicine. Mm-hmm. They said scientifically, this is what needs to happen with this medicine. And the Secretary of Education, who happens to be female, says, I am a mother, and I personally do not believe that what they have authorized is something that I believe in, and therefore, because I'm a mom and I know better, I'm going to tell everybody in America, you can't have it.
So I'm the boss, so one person can decide that you can't have a drug.
Based on my unilateral personal bias, I'm now going to prohibit what the scientists and physicians who've researched this for years say ought to be done from being done. So she was then sued, and the administration fought that lawsuit and lost. Then they said they would appeal. Now they've decided they're not going to appeal, and so the law, which is that she has to follow what the scientists have recommended, is now being enforced, and that's happening. What our concern is that if you have a politician who's willing to put themselves at the apex of the decision-making matrix and on their own recognizance make a decision that impacts tens of thousands of people,
millions of people,
that is not the way this thing needs to be set
That's
up.
not democracy.
So we want you to write your congressman.
That's a queen. That means she's the queen of the United States, and or of their drugs, and she's going to take over and say, nope, can't have it. I don't think that's right. Science says this, but we're not.
For whatever reason, whether it's religious, moral, economic.
But science is interesting. You can say there is no research. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
If you don't look at it, oh, there's no research because I've not read it. You know, so you can get rid of, on the basis of science, you can say there's no research that supports this, when there's thousands of articles. Just because you haven't read it, you say there's no research.
It's like a joke that kids play. You know, I can't see. Why? I have my eyes closed.
That's right.
We don't want someone at the head of a government agency using that methodology to make decisions that affect your health and your medicine.
Let me use one example that science has lots of articles about and lots of research about that no one has accepted. Okay. But the compounding pharmacy takes up the role of providing the hormone. Okay. In two ways. That there was no science prior to the 2010 that giving progesterone in pregnancy would stop a miscarriage or stop a preterm labor. However, those of us who understood the physiology of it and who understood that when you give progesterone to somebody who's in preterm labor, really preterm labor, like 20 weeks, halfway through a pregnancy, they stop contracting. So we would have compounding pharmacies make pure progesterone, and we would give that to our patients, and we would save babies' lives. Okay? There was research on that, but no drug company wanted to either do the research or they weren't going to make enough money on it. So for $20 for a shot, and like it was a shot that we gave I think it was twice a week. So we'd give these shots, and early in the pregnancy we'd have to give it daily. But it was progesterone and oil, a natural hormone. It did not harm the baby. It did not hurt the mother, and it preserved the pregnancy in women who couldn't make enough progesterone to support their own normal baby.
Right.
So we would make sure, do all of the things doctors do, make sure everything was safe, and then we would make sure that this baby came to term by using natural progesterone made by compounding pharmacies. I did that from 1985 until I stopped doing OB a few years ago. And in 2010, they went, oh, progesterone. It works to stop babies from dying, being born too early. So then they developed a bunch of research. They passed it through the FDA, and they said finally that you can use progesterone in oil, and then progesterone in oil for the dose that you need to preserve your pregnancy twice a week became $2,500.
Wow.
So imagine that. So if you have to have that every week, twice, or God forbid daily, for a certain period of time in the early part of pregnancy, what happened by going through the FDA is it went up by 1,000. It was $20. I don't know. You do the math, or 100, and no one can afford it.
Yeah.
I mean, insurance companies don't want to pay for it. I don't blame them, but you can get the same thing from a compounding pharmacy still for like $25. Right. It's not expensive. Right. So that's what we're talking about.
So you can buy the licensed brand name drug for $2,500.
Yeah.
Or you can buy the compounded generic for $20. And so you can see that the major pharmaceutical companies have a vested interest in controlling what the compounding pharmacies can do. Right.
They don't want to compete against them, but also the FDA makes them do billions of dollars of research.
Right.
When there's already research out there, they have to do specific research and go through trials, even though there's lots of research present, to then pass something like this. Just think how many babies' lives would have been saved from miscarriage, from preterm labor, if they would have acknowledged this drug and then said, oh yeah, you guys can use this for preterm labor. I used it, even though it was off-label. But I knew that it worked because of all this other research, and it saved babies' lives. So that's one drug, and one problem. Same drug / hormone, progesterone. Until just a few years ago, the American College of OBGYN said there was no such thing as PMS. No kidding. I knew there was PMS when I had it. And my patients knew there was PMS, and I knew.
What do you mean, no research?
That's right.
Look at my head.
That's right. But I looked up all the research, and all the research showed that it only happened in the second half of the cycle, which is when you make progesterone. It don't, you know, and they had researched pure progesterone, and it relieved the symptoms.
Yeah.
But no one did that research for the FDA. So the only drug the FDA came out with was an antidepressant. When they finally acknowledged the illness or the problem, they made it a psychiatric illness and not a GYN or hormonal illness. Of course, because we're female, we must be crazy. So they, instead of just saying it's a hormone deficit, they made it an antidepressant is what you use to treat it now. They still don't acknowledge pure progesterone. And they don't have an FDA-approved progesterone to give you that helps with PMS because it can't be oral. If it's oral, it turns into estrogen. It makes you worse. So you have to take pure progesterone in a non-oral way, like vaginally. We used to give it as rectal suppositories, sublingual tablets. And that way,
shots.
You can get, well, shots aren't usually used for PMS. No one goes quite that far. It's not, you don't need that high a dose. But in general, we used to give it just 2 weeks out of the month. And then that made everybody normal. And it also made their periods normal, which the antidepressants don't.
Right.
So we're making people hormonally normal, and then their brain is more normal. Well, that's still, now that they say, oh yeah, there is PMS, oops, we're sorry, but it's a psychiatric disease. And then they've made it, then the government's made it or that's the only body that would make it.
It's
they
a
made
lunar
it.
cycle-induced hysteria.
If we were all on the same cycle, I might agree, but we aren't. And so that's impossible. So,
Yeah.
So it's a progesterone issue, and it does work when you give people pure progesterone. But compounding pharmacies have always made these, and the FDA doesn't approve of any, so they don't allow pharmaceutical companies to make them. So those are two just exceptions that are becoming the rule. We have to go to, compounding pharmacies to get all kinds of things. Even pain medicine is not approved by the FDA, and so as a drug for pain,
so
the
Kathy,
same drug we have
what
to
your
use.
argument is not that the government shouldn't regulate compounding pharmacies.
No, I didn't. They already do.
Your argument is that some politician somewhere or some economically vested group like
Somebody
Major
who
Pharma.
wants to make money. We're not talking about people saving money because compounding pharmacies save money for patients.
Right. So your argument is that the compounding pharmacies should be able to compound or produce the medicines that they are asked for by physicians who are licensed and trained.
Yeah. I mean, why did we go to
and that the
school if we
government
weren't
has
allowed to write prescriptions?
The government has a vested interest in sanitary procedures, safety procedures, production rules, and all that sort of thing as far as safety and preservation of the ingredients and so on. But as far as what they are allowed to make, you think it ought to be open to what the compounding pharmacist and the physician who've studied these things are willing to try.
Otherwise, yes. Otherwise, why did I study pharmacology? Why did I study how everything works in the human body? Why did I even have to know that? Instead, you could just hook yourself up to a computer and just go, okay, this is what I need. What does the FDA say I need?
Right.
And then they'll give you probably nothing.
Well,
I guess that is cheaper if you don't take any drugs, but you're miserable.
We've done other podcasts about that exact issue, physicians that are unwilling to take the risk to prescribe something off-label. The FDA, when the research is done and somebody applies for a patent on a drug and the FDA approves the drug, they give you a patent and they say, this is a drug that's specific for this issue. You find other uses for that drug that are beneficial.
Right.
And it's not illegal for you to use that, but it's off-label.
Right. It's off-label. But why should I wait 10 years?
Yeah.
My patient doesn't have 10 years.
Right.
They don't have 10 years to yet wait till they approve of progesterone to save a baby.
Okay.
They may have multiple miscarriages. I'm giving them progesterone to save them so they can be a mom. Why should I have to wait for the FDA to say, yes, you may do that?
So for the thousands of people that take bioidentical testosterone pellets that are made by compounding pharmacies,
right?
Why are we having this conversation today about Senate Bill 959?
Because testosterone has two problems. One is that it is looked at as a drug that can be abused, so the DEA is trying to limit our ability to give testosterone back to aging patients because young people misuse it.
in steroids and
in
athletics.
steroids, but not in general, not in pure testosterone, and certainly not from compounding pharmacies. It's usually from Eastern European email kind of prescriptions without a doctor's consent. That's totally illegal, but they haven't cracked down on that. So everybody thinks testosterone is bad when in fact it's life-saving to some of us who don't have ovaries, to men who have lost their testosterone, gives them their life back and protects them from other diseases. So it's very cost-effective. One hormone treats multiple symptoms and it's preventative for other diseases. So that is what we need to continue, because there is nothing like it, and there probably won't be, because it's a pure substance and it won't be patented. And nobody's going to go through the cost to get it passed through the FDA. So we need to get it in an alternative way, because it's
not ever going to be an FDA-approved prescription drug
because
for
it
women.
can't be patented.
Yeah.
Or for men.
Or for men.
Or for men in that form.
Yes.
Most of the things that they have now in gels and creams for the men are something that turns into estrogen as you rub it on your skin.
Right.
And they can't take it for long periods of time, and it's risky. But pure testosterone doesn't do that. So it's safer. So the things that they've approved aren't as safe as the pure testosterone in pellet form for men.
So why is that relative to this bill?
Because if the pharmaceutical companies have effect on the legislation, and you know they do through their lobbyists, if they can motivate lobbyists, or the lobbyists can motivate the senators and the congressmen and women to pass this, saying, oh, it's to make us safer, when in fact it gives the power of the FDA to stop all compounding pharmacies from either existing or from making it so difficult they can't make pure hormones or orphan drugs or pain medicine for less money, or anything like that's ahead of its time, like progesterone was 20 years ago. They give the FDA complete power in one decision without scientific backing. You don't have to have scientific backing for them to say, oh, you can't make that anymore. And they give you 90 days to figure it out, and then talk to the FDA about it. We need to stop that part of this bill.
Okay.
That part of this bill has to go. The safety's fine. But the part that says the FDA has complete control over compounding pharmacies to stop production of a drug, I mean,
so what we
that
want
doesn't
you to
make
do
sense.
is we want you to write your senator. This is a Senate bill. Write your senator, or write the senators on the health subcommittee in the Senate. You can go to the U.S. Senate webpage to find the health committee and a list of all the senators that are there. You can type in your senator's name or U.S. Senator for and your zip code name in a Google search, and you'll get their address. We want you to write your senator to say, I am concerned about what I'm hearing about Senate Bill 959, in particular in terms of its ability to regulate my access to a compounding pharmacy that makes testosterone bioidentical pellets for me, because I need this, my doctor prescribes this, I'm, whatever your justifications are.
Or any other compounding hormone.
Or any other compounding hormone that they make. The bill has been read twice in committee already in the Senate at the end of May. It'll go to the full Senate. If it passes the full Senate, it'll go to the House. It's still a long way from being law, but you want to get your hand in the water now.
And this kind of thing comes back.
So please,
even if they don't pass it this year,
yeah,
they'll have all of your responses on file
right,
if they try to bring it back in the next session. So it's bipartisan.
Yeah.
So even if
yeah,
you're
there
a
are 3
Democrat
Democrats
and
and 2 Republicans that are currently sponsoring this bill as it is written. Now, it's still amendable. It still can be changed. And what you're saying is amend or change it so that I'm protected in my access to these medicines that I need.
Thank you for your help.
Email your questions or comments to podcast@biobalancehealth.com. You can find the BioBalance Healthcast on iTunes and on YouTube. For more information about bioidentical hormone pellet therapy and other reverse aging solutions, visit biobalancehealth.com or call 314-993-0963. You can find Dr. Maupin on Twitter @Dr. Kathy Maupin and on Facebook at facebook.com/biobalancehealth. Find Brett Newcomb at brettnewcomb.com.